Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Trimming and finishing a pot is actually the part I tend to like best. Throwing the form is fun, very organic, but I particularly like the distinguishing marks that you can put in at this next stage. How you play with a handle, how you play with the foot, introducing a chop, which is the maker's mark. And so this part for me is super fun, so I'm breaking it up into spaces. So rather than just having an extremely long video with trimming and then putting on the chop and also introducing the handle, I'm going to break these up. So right now I'm just going to show you how I put a chop on a pot and some finishing touches. So here's a little family. Got five guys here all lined up, all a little different. Yay for that. And for these, whoops, a little imbalance here. Each of these a little different. The feet are going to be slightly different. The top, there's our like family stamp, that double line, that's going to be consistent throughout. That's what says we're a family. So this foot's a little different. It's more defined. It's more of sort of a classic foot, but again, just sort of lightly beveled there. This one, different yet again. And I mean, that to me is the joy of this kind of work. One thing I do at this stage is I've made this rounder. It's just a very simple glazed stoneware cone. And when you press the clay into the pot, onto the lip, when it's inverted on the wheel, it often just squidges the top a little bit out of center. And so I like to do a final touch here, which is to press the rounder into the top of any piece that I'm going to have that wants to be round instead of something I've intentionally warped or put askew. And so I just want to pull out any issues here. It went a little oval or it's got a little something. It also sort of tightens that up a bit, which is never a bad thing. But this one you can maybe see is it's a little off. And sometimes they'll just kind of get back to circular in the kiln because as they're heated, as I said, they want to kind of return to their original shape. But sometimes they don't, so I like to give it a little brief assist here. Press it in kind of hard. It also is yet again just compressing the clay ever so slightly. But that's a step. And then the next step is putting what is essentially the maker's mark onto the pot. And a maker's mark in pottery and ceramics is called a chop. And I believe, I used to know more about this than I do now. I'm going to go look again, actually, and refresh my memory. But I think the word chop comes from Hindi. It's a Hindi word, and it just meant a mark. And so in this case, I left some trimming lines on the base just because I rather liked them and I had enough clay to play with to do that. And then I have a little more distinct line there where the glaze will meet the foot. And then I want to just take a little touch of water, just a fingertip of water. I'm going to place it on there, and I want that to soak in for a little bit, just to soften the very outer skin of the clay so that when I press my chop in, it'll leave a nice clean impression. And depending on how hard the clay is, it doesn't always do that. So some of my birds have really clearly defined feathers or those, whiter spots, and some of them just don't. And I don't care that much because when I'm doing one of the next stages, I sort of like the variation that comes up there. So initially my chop was just a little porcelain guy that I made and fired to a lower temperature, a bisque temperature. And he's just a little bird. He's not any particular type of bird, he's just a bird. But he kind of wore out through extensive use. And so I found a guy who made chops out of brass. And so I literally sent him just a drawing of that same bird that I had done, and he puts on in his computer, I think, and then he can replicate it. So I use this brass bird now, which I really quite like. So I'm waiting for this to sort of dry out. Well, it doesn't dry out, it sinks in a little bit. And as it does, when it gets to a certain, really it's again, how reflective it is, I know that it's going to be ready for the next step, which is I take some cornstarch and I want to dust it ever so slightly, because in dusting it, I'm going to make sure it doesn't get basically gunked up in my chop. So I'm just going to tap that on there very gently. And the cornstarch, of course, is just going to completely burn off when we get to a high temperature firing. So I then want to support it on the inside. So I just put my finger in there and I'm going to press from the inside out and then just push him in. I want the eye to be nicely defined if I can. And I want the tail to be nice. So kind of roll it around. That's a nice clean one. And they're not all that clean, and that's just fine with me. And then I have this particular knife. And the only thing I ever use this knife for so far, I've used it for a couple other things, but not many, is the feet. I just really like the distance of the serration. And so I just put a couple little feet in there and wiggle them around. And then that's the chop. And I'll usually do what started out as a CSM or a CS in a dark underglaze, but that's a later stage. So that is that. So that's the application of the chop. And the next video, what I'll do is I'll be applying a handle. And then they'll be kind of ready. Thanks for joining. Bye.